Now, in advance of Friday's general election, we're talking to all the party leaders. This evening we're joined by Mary Lou McDonald, leader of Sinn Féin and outgoing TD for Dublin Central. You're very welcome. Thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you,
On 6-1. Let's begin with the big picture, the economic picture. Reading your manifesto, you're planning to spend more and to save less than the other two parties that are aiming to lead the government. And some people would say, some economists would say, that leaves you with less room for manoeuvre if things go bad, if corporation tax dries up and so on. What would you say to that?
Well, look, the figures that we're operating within are from the Department of Finance, from their budgetary packages. And we have set out, you're right, a very ambitious plan for investment in infrastructure, especially in housing. We're in the grip of a housing crisis. Spending also to alleviate the cost of living crisis, which is causing so much hardship for families, for communities, for businesses. And we are looking to give tax relief by taking the first €45,000 of each worker's income out of the USC. We're presenting a balanced package, a responsible package over a 5-year term of government will run surpluses.
But smaller surpluses than the other parties are planning.
But we will make a greater investment in the infrastructural risks and challenges that are causing damage socially but also economically in the here and now. And we will put money into the rainy day funds. But you see the longer term forecasting and what might happen and what might go wrong. Just remember, we know in the here and now that housing is not just causing social distress, and distress, especially for younger people, but right across our society. There is an economic price tag on that as well, and it's damaging us as an investment location.
Now, economists would say again that pumping a lot of money into an economy that's already running at full tilt does pose the danger of raising inflation, which is going to increase the cost of living for people. And it applies to all three parties, but more so to you if you're planning to spend more.
I would say simply to that, we have no option but to tackle the housing crisis. There isn't an option now. I mean, we have had 5 years of runaway house prices, of runaway rents. Frankly, I don't know how people pay the rents. They're that high. Record homelessness, including child homelessness. An entire generation locked out of any prospect of owning their own home. People making decisions to leave the country because they feel that they've been locked out and they have no opportunity here. So there isn't an option but for us to make the kind of investment that we are envisaging. And far from it having a negative consequence, it will have positive consequences for us as a society, but also for the Irish economy. OK.
On housing, do you accept that capacity constraints are a problem with the construction industry and may make what you're proposing impossible?
Well, no, I do accept that, for example, in terms of training more apprentices more efficiently, that there's work to be done there. I do accept that we need to do everything we can by having better, more effective workforce planning to expand our capacity. But I would remind you, the construction workforce is at or slightly above what it was at full tilt of the Celtic Tiger.
Is it? Because I looked up the figures. CSO recorded employment in construction in the second quarter of 2007 at 282,000. The last figures I saw from Deeper for the end of last year was 161,000. So it's
I'd contest those figures. And I'd tell you another thing. I have spoken to construction firms, smaller operators, who will tell you that they have, in fact, let workers go. Now, you might find that extraordinary. I certainly did.
Well, the CIF says
in the middle of a housing
crisis. The CIF says 75% of construction companies cite access to skilled labour as a challenge.
The issue here that I'm reflecting to is, yes, we need to up our through pipe of apprentices. Yes, we need to grow and grow and grow our workforce. But if you talk to people in industry, certainly in our conversations with them, they have said to us there are many, many challenges: de-risking, finance, access to land, strong pipelines of work. But the general consensus is where the work is, where there's money to be made, where there's construction to be done, you will find the workforce. OK.
Will banks give mortgages on houses where the land is still owned by the state? This is one of your ideas for giving people affordable houses.
So, and this is a really important scheme, and it's directed at those who earn too much for council housing, but who have no opportunity. So
and you're talking about 25,000 houses, I think, in that category. Yeah.
So it's at that group of people who currently have no opportunity to buy their home. We have met with the banks on several occasions. Banks, of course, have requirements that have to be met before they will lend into a scheme. I don't think any of us should be surprised by that. They want to be sure that they will get their money back, and that's fair enough. And we are absolutely confident that we can meet those requirements. Why? Because they have lent into schemes designed by the current government, which carry equivalent risk. In fact, probably less risk in our scheme, because the affordable homes will actually be affordable, and the risk of mortgage default consequently will be much less.
OK, but they haven't said that they will. Now, they may, well, and David, you have to sort out the details, and obviously they won't give you a commitment until they see the details.
David.
Yes?
The banks agree to schemes like this, finally, and sign off with governments. Yes. Not with parties of opposition. And I would say it is to our very great credit and a reflection of the fact that we have our work done, that we have our plans set, that we have done our due diligence, and we commenced that interaction with the banks from the opposition benches.
But you haven't got a final answer.
But look, they have set out that they have to... Their fear is if a home is sold and the state still holds the land, how do they get their money back? We have made it very, very clear to them that they have first call in getting their money back if in the event of a default. And I think that will more than amply meet their requirements.
Our viewers out there will be looking at your manifesto, they'll be listening to you tonight, and they'll be wondering, are you going to be able to deliver on your promises, which is a reasonable question to ask. You don't have a record in government in this jurisdiction. You do have a record in government in Northern Ireland where the housing situation is not good, to put it mildly.
Well, the public service picture north of the border more generally isn't good, but to compare north and south of the border is literally comparing apples and oranges. North of the border, there is not the capacity to raise or vary taxes. You are looking at an entirely different scenario, and I regret that deeply. I'm a United Irelander, but sadly, at this point in time, our country is partitioned.
But Sinn Féin knew those constraints were there when your Minister Deirdre Hargey promised 100,000 new houses over 15 years in December 2021. A third of them affordable. That's 2,200 social homes per year. Last year, 1,400 delivered.
She set out a hugely ambitious transformational plan for housing and public housing north of the border. The Tories, sadly, who unfortunately hold the purse strings, and now the successor government under Keir Starmer, are not minded to fund the north correctly. That's at the root of the problem here. But did she not
know that when she made the promise that hasn't been delivered?
Listen, if we were to dance to every British government's drum...
I'm not suggesting you dance to anybody's drum. I'm asking you, when that promise was made, did she know that the British government held the purse strings?
In every interaction that we have had with a British government, we do not start from the lowest common denominator. We aim high, we make our demands high, and we will not stop. We will not stop. Our colleagues on the executive, led by Michelle O'Neill, constantly putting pressure on the Treasury in London to finance and to fund the North correctly. And it's a matter of great frustration to me, as you can imagine, as a Republican and a United Irelander, that on the one hand, the British government, the system insists that it remain and hold jurisdiction in the North, and yet it won't fund the place correctly. But to make a comparison, David, between the South and what is deliverable here
but I wasn't
making
a comparison. I wasn't making a comparison. I was asking about delivery of promises in the constraints that apply.
And I think you will find, if you looked at the record of Sinn Féin in a power-sharing arrangement north of the border and assessed the capacity to deliver, my colleagues have delivered in spades, sometimes in very, very challenging circumstances in a multi-party arrangement. As a matter of fact, that showcases best, I think, Sinn Féin's ability not just to form an administration, but to hold things together and to achieve things in very, very difficult and constrained circumstances. OK,
well, the Northern Ireland Minister for Health claims that he's been underfunded by the Sinn Féin Finance Minister. He says he's £100 million short and he can't give health workers a 5.5% pay rise recommended by an independent pay review.
Well, he will know that Caoimhe Archibald, who is the finance minister, put a huge priority and a huge amount of funding into health north of the border. But in fairness, she cannot do a loaves and fishes job. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman and a brilliant minister, but she does not have the power of miracles, unfortunately.
In your manifesto, there's been some criticism of your call for an end to the supply of weapons to Ukraine. The Ukrainian embassy in Ireland said it was disturbed by what it called an irresponsible call that lack of military aid will increase mass killings of Ukrainians and will have catastrophic consequences for the world. How would you respond to that charge?
Well, the first thing I would say is that the Ukrainian embassy here in Dublin is a small embassy. They're incredibly effective and they do their job very, very well, articulating the Ukrainian position. And I respect that. Putin is the aggressor here and he is to be condemned, sanctioned and brought to heel without a doubt. But from an Irish perspective and from an international perspective, the launching of long-range missiles, be they British or American, into Russia is not good news. It represents a very significant ratcheting up of this conflict, a very dangerous conflict in a world that is very unstable. And the Irish contribution to this international crisis, I believe, is best delivered by pushing forward what really is the job of the international community, and that is to end this conflict, and it'll be ended ultimately by diplomacy and by politics.
Your message in this election is one of change, as it was indeed the last time. But you haven't ruled out doing a government deal with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, and People Before Profit have criticised you for that. What would you say to Richard Boyd Barrett about that?
Well, look, I don't think we could be more explicit. I mean,
I know you don't want to.
No, but the opportunity that presents, and I think it's reflected particularly today when polling figures start to catch up with the momentum that I am feeling on the ground for change and for a change of government, is that we have the opportunity for the very first time in a century to have a government led by someone other than Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, by Sinn Féin. I want that to be a government without Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. So therefore, we're asking people to vote for Sinn Féin to change the government and, of course, to transfer on to other parties and individuals who are also nailed on for change. But just to make the point, Sinn Féin is the party that can drive that effort. So if you want that change of government that is urgent and long overdue, we are the party to vote for.
But you're not ruling out in certain circumstances, talking to Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, perhaps...
I've said, and you'll have heard me say this a million times as well. You see, when the votes are counted, I'm going to talk to everybody, David. I remember at the end of the last election, in a very arrogant, high-handed way, the old establishment parties dismissing us. Never mind me, there was no skin off my nose. But you see people who had voted for Sinn Féin in their hundreds of thousands. That was not well received because it was arrogant. I will not be arrogant in that way. OK, Mary Lou McDonald, leader of Sinn Féin, thank you so much for joining us. My pleasure. And you can watch back all of our leaders' interviews on the RTE News homepage by clicking on the election link.